My wife controlled every dollar I spent for 12 years. Then, while she was away on business, I secretly bought a $2 lottery ticket and won $68 million. I didn't call her, I didn't celebrate, I hid the ticket. I'm Ethan Mercer. People say money changes people. They're wrong. Money reveals who was already beside you and who you became, just to survive them. As I stared at those winning numbers, my first thought wasn't a mansion, a new car, or quitting work. It was Claire. Because I knew exactly what would happen if she found out. So, before my wife came home, I made one decision. And by the time she discovered what I'd done, the real betrayal wasn't mine. From the outside, Claire and I looked like the kind of couple people pointed to when they talked about having life figured out. We lived in a 4-bedroom brick colonial in Montgomery, Ohio, with 2 cars in the garage, a good school district, and a 10-year-old son named Noah who loved robotics, space documentaries, and asking questions no adult could answer before coffee. Claire was 40 and worked as a regional finance director for a medical equipment company. I was 42 and ran a small construction estimating business from home. 12 years earlier, when we married, that arrangement had felt temporary. Claire's salary was steady. Mine came in waves, so when she offered to handle the household finances, I let her. At first, it seemed efficient. Then, efficient became permission. Every Sunday night, Claire opened her laptop at the kitchen table and reviewed our spending: gas, groceries, tools for my work, lunch with a client, a birthday gift for Noah's friend. She never shouted. That would have been easier to recognize. She asked questions. Why did you think we needed this? Couldn't that have waited? Did you compare prices first? Always calm, always reasonable, always with the tone of someone correcting a mistake. I had no credit card in my name. Large purchases required discussion. Small purchases required explanation. Lottery tickets were forbidden entirely. Claire called them a tax on people who confuse hope with math. I laughed the first few times. Eventually, I stopped laughing. The embarrassing part was that I never told anyone. I was a grown man who could estimate a multi-million-dollar construction project, but still found himself explaining an $18 hardware store charge to his wife. So I told myself silence meant peace. Really. I had just gotten used to living inside someone else's rules, and somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing how small I felt. Claire left for Atlanta on a Monday morning for a quarterly conference. Before she walked out, she reminded me to transfer money for Noah's robotics fee and not to forget the water bill. Then she kissed my cheek, rolled her suitcase down the driveway, and left. The house felt different when her Lexus disappeared. That evening, Noah stayed over at his friend Mason's. I finished estimates, ate leftovers standing at the counter, and around 8 I drove to a convenience store on Sycamore Creek Road. I almost walked past the lottery display. Instead, I stopped. "One Powerball," I said. The cashier barely looked up. I paid $2 in cash from the old personal account I used for freelance expenses and slid the ticket into my wallet. It felt stupid. It also felt like the first decision I had made in years that belonged only to me. 2 days later, I checked the numbers on my phone. I checked them twice, then a third time. Every number matched. $68 million. I sat alone at the same kitchen table where Claire had reviewed my spending every Sunday night. For the first time, I had something bigger than the system she used to control me. I didn't tell anyone. For almost an hour, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone face down beside me, and the ticket locked inside my wallet. The coffee went cold. Sunlight moved across the floor. My mind kept circling the same fact. $68 million. I should have been happy. Instead, I was scared, not of losing the ticket, not of taxes, not even of what people might do if they found out. I was afraid of Claire. More specifically, I was afraid of what would happen the second she knew. I could already hear her voice. "How did you get that?" It was the same question she asked about everything. Whether I bought a new drill bit, took Noah to lunch, or spent $20 without mentioning it first. That afternoon, I picked Noah up from school, made tacos, checked his homework, and listened to him explain why Saturn could float in water if you somehow found an ocean big enough. I smiled at the right moments. Inside, I was running scenarios. If I told Claire immediately, she would take control before the shock even wore off. She would call attorneys, financial planners, tax specialists. There would be meetings, folders, passwords, structures, and eventually a system so complicated, I would need her permission just to understand my own money. And the worst part was, She would call it protecting us. Maybe $68 million wouldn't open the cage. Maybe it would just make the cage larger. That night, after Noah went to bed, another thought came back to me. A message I had seen on Claire's phone months earlier. The contact was saved as EB. The message said only, "Wish you were still here." Claire had been traveling then, too. I had told myself it was work. A joke. Nothing. I had become very good at calling things nothing. But lying awake that night, I finally let myself ask the question I had avoided for months. If my marriage was already broken, how much of this money could Claire take if I left? And for once, I needed the answer before she gave me one. At 2 in the morning, I gave up pretending I could sleep. I went downstairs, opened my laptop, and started searching questions I had never imagined asking. Ohio lottery winnings divorce. Are lottery winnings marital property? Can a spouse claim money from a ticket bought with separate funds? Trusts for lottery winners. For 12 years, Claire had been the person who understood money. At least, that was the story we had repeated until it became fact. Now I was reading statutes, articles, summaries, anything I could find. The answer was not simple. In Ohio, lottery winnings could become part of a marital property dispute, especially if the ticket had been purchased with marital funds. But source, timing, tracing, and legal structure mattered. That word, tracing, caught my attention. The $2 had come from an old personal account I opened before Claire and I married. I still used it occasionally for freelance expenses. There was a little over $5,000 in it. For once, something in my financial life existed outside her system. I wrote down 3 attorneys who specialized in high net worth planning and complex asset protection. Then I closed the laptop. On the refrigerator was one of Noah's drawings, our house. 3 stick figures, and a dog we did not own. I stared at it. What kind of man was I teaching my son to become? One who kept the peace by disappearing inside it. That was the moment the fear changed. I stopped asking what Claire would do. I started asking what I would do. Before she came home, I was going to understand my position, protect the ticket, and make one decision on my own. The first attorney on my list was Evelyn Grant, a private client lawyer in Cincinnati, who handled complex estates and sudden wealth. I called her office the next morning. When the receptionist asked what kind of matter I had, I said, "Lottery winnings. Confidential." There was a pause. She gave me an appointment that afternoon. I drove downtown with the ticket sealed inside an envelope in my jacket pocket. Evelyn was 58, silver-haired, precise, and had the kind of calm that made panic feel unnecessary. I told her everything. The ticket, Claire, the account, 12 years of financial control, the message from EB. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. "First," she said, "do not lose that ticket. Second, Ohio uses equitable distribution. Claire can argue that the winnings belong partly to the marriage. Whether that succeeds depends heavily on the source of the $2 and what you do before claiming." I showed her the old account records. That changed her expression. She explained how a revocable trust, paired with an LLC and clean financial tracing, could create distance between the winnings and any future marital property claim. I still had 86 days to claim the prize. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Are you planning to divorce your wife?" I looked through her window at the Cincinnati skyline. "I'm planning to understand my position before I decide anything." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Then we start with facts." For the first time, someone was helping me build a plan without taking it away from me. Claire came home from Atlanta on Saturday evening. Noah heard the garage door first and ran downstairs before I could get out of the kitchen. Claire stepped inside carrying her laptop bag, a suitcase, and the polished expression she always wore after work trips. She kissed Noah's forehead, kissed my cheek, and asked whether everything had gone smoothly. "Fine," I said. That night, I made roast chicken and potatoes. Claire talked about budget forecasts, a difficult vendor, and a presentation that had gone better. I watched her across the table and tried to decide whether she looked different now that I was allowing myself to question her. She didn't. That was almost worse. Later, after Noah went to bed, Claire looked at me from the couch. "You're quiet." Long week. She accepted that faster than I expected. But, over the next few days, I noticed her watching me more, as if she could sense that something in the house had shifted without knowing what. Then, on Tuesday morning, she left her laptop open on the kitchen island while she showered. I told myself not to touch it. I lasted maybe 30 seconds. Her email was already open. Near the top of the inbox was a message from Evan Brooks. Subject: next time you're in Atlanta. I clicked it. The first lines were casual. Dinner. A hotel bar? A joke about a presentation. Then the tone changed. He wrote that he still couldn't stop thinking about the night before her flight home. There were older messages below it. This was not one dinner. It was not one mistake. It had been happening for months. My hands stayed steady as I took photographs of the screen with my phone. That surprised me. What hurt most was not discovering that Claire was having an affair. It was realizing I was barely surprised. Somewhere in the last few years, I had stopped expecting honesty from my wife and simply never admitted it to myself. I closed the laptop exactly as I found it and walked into the garage. For several minutes, I stood beside my workbench listening to the furnace hum through the wall. Then I texted Evelyn. I found proof of an affair. I'm ready to discuss next steps. Her reply came 10 minutes later. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, bring everything. I put my phone away. The ticket had given me options. Claire had just given me a reason to use them. Over the next 3 weeks, Evelyn and I met 4 times. By the final meeting, Sycamore Creek Family Trust existed on paper, along with an LLC designed to hold the assets and keep every transaction cleanly documented. Evelyn handled the lottery claim through the trust. I signed where she'd told me to sign. Then I waited. 24 days later, after the lump sum election and taxes, just under $38 million landed in accounts controlled through the structure we had built. I stared at the number for a long time, not because I felt rich, because for the first time in 12 years, Claire could not reach something simply because she believed she should. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. Claire was served at her office at 10:52 on a Wednesday morning. My phone rang at 11:01. I let it go. At 3:20, I picked Noah up from school and took him for burgers. He spent 20 minutes explaining a robotics competition while my phone vibrated in my pocket. Claire called again at 4:16. Then at 6:43, I finally answered. "What is this?" she said. "The filing is clear. You did this without talking to me." "Yes." There was silence. Then she said, "I'm coming home." "You can," I said, "but we're not doing this in front of Noah." She never came that night. She stayed with her father across town instead. Robert Callahan came to the house 2 days later. Evelyn had warned me it would happen. "The family will mobilize," she'd said. "Do not mistake concern for neutrality." Robert was 67, a retired bank executive who still dressed like every conversation might end with someone signing something. He had always treated me politely, but never quite as an equal. Claire had inherited that from him, the belief that competence gave you authority over everyone less certain than you. He sat at my kitchen table without taking off his coat. "Claire told me about the trust," he said. "I assumed she would. She also told me you hid the lottery winnings from her. I protected them before filing for divorce." His jaw tightened. "You understand how that looks." "I understand what my attorney says the law allows." Robert leaned back and studied me. Then came the reasonable voice. He said Claire was willing to slow everything down. Marriage counseling, a postnuptial agreement, a proper financial plan, maybe even separate investment accounts, if that made me feel more comfortable. Every offer sounded generous. Every offer ended in the same place. The money would return to a structure Claire understood, Claire approved, and Claire could influence. "No," I said. Robert's expression changed slightly. "You're blowing up your family because, for the first time in your life, you think you have leverage." The sentence landed exactly where he intended. For years, I might have defended myself. Instead, I said, "I'm ending a marriage that was already broken. You have a son." "I know." "Then, act like a father." That one hit harder. I looked at him and thought about Noah watching me apologize for decisions I was entitled to make. Being a father is part of why I'm doing this. Robert stood at the doorway. He turned back. "This money will change you." I almost laughed. "It already did." He narrowed his eyes. "No, you just think it gave you power." I shook my head. "It gave me options." After he left, I locked the door. Then my hands started shaking. I let them. For 5 minutes, I stood in the kitchen and felt every old reflex telling me I had gone too far. Then I called Mike. "I need somewhere to stay for a few days," I said. "Bring Noah," he replied. He didn't ask why. That was exactly what I needed. I packed our bags before I could reconsider. Claire's first attempt to pull me back came 3 days after Noah and I reached Mike's house in Indianapolis. Flowers arrived at noon. "Not roses, white lilies," the card said. "I miss you. I miss us. We can fix this." I put them on the kitchen counter because Noah said they smelled good. I did not answer. Her next move came by text 2 days later. I've been thinking. I know I made mistakes. I know I can be controlling sometimes. But Ethan, think about what we could build for Noah with this money. We could set up his future. We could invest properly. We could create something bigger than either of us. I read it twice. That was when I understood she had not changed. Even now, with our marriage collapsing, Claire was still talking like a finance director presenting a strategy deck. She did not say she loved me. She did not say she was sorry for Evan. She did not say she understood what 12 years of being managed had done to me. She said, essentially, let me help manage this too. I put the phone face down. A week later, Evelyn forwarded a letter from Claire's attorney formally claiming that the lottery winnings were marital property and accusing me of deliberately concealing assets. Evelyn read the letter over the phone and said, standard opening position, aggressive, but expected. You're not worried. I'm prepared. I decided to borrow her confidence. Mike never pushed me to talk. That was his way. He cooked breakfast, took Noah to a Pacers game, and let me sit on the back porch with coffee without trying to repair me. On the 4th night, he finally said, you know what changed about you after you married her? I looked over. You started asking permission before you had opinions. I laughed once, but it hit harder than I wanted it to. Jason drove in the next evening from Columbus after Mike called him. We had been friends since college, but I had seen less and less of him over the years because Claire considered him impulsive. The three of us sat in Mike's basement with takeout containers and beer. I told them everything. The ticket, the $38 million, Evelyn, Evan Brooks, the trust, the divorce, Robert. Jason stared at me for a second after I finished. Let me get this straight, he said. In 6 weeks, you bought a lottery ticket in secret, won $68 million, hired a lawyer, protected the money, found out your wife was cheating, filed for divorce, and stood up to her father. Pretty much. He shook his head. Where the hell has this guy been for 12 years? I looked down at the bottle in my hands. I did not know the answer, but for the first time, I understood that the man I had been before Claire had not disappeared. I had just kept him quiet long enough to forget he was still there. And sitting there with them, I could finally hear his voice again. Claire and Robert came to the house Sunday. Noah was at a friend's birthday party, and I had agreed to the meeting only after speaking with Evelyn. Her instructions were simple: stay calm, document everything, and do not let them control the room. So I told them 2 o'clock. Kitchen only. Robert arrived first. Claire came in behind him, dressed casually, as if softer clothes could make the conversation softer too. We're not here to fight, Robert said. I'm glad to hear it. Claire sat across from me. I stayed standing. I've started counseling, she said. I've been thinking about everything. I waited. I know I was controlling. I know I handled things badly, but Noah needs stability. He needs both of us. He has both of us. You know what I mean. I do. I just don't agree. Robert stepped in. This does not have to become public. There are ways to settle privately. Counseling. A postnup. Independent accounts. You can preserve the marriage and protect yourself. Protect myself from what? Claire leaned forward. From making a permanent decision while you're angry. I'm not angry. That seemed to bother her more. The trust needs to be part of any conversation, she said. No, Ethan. That money was won during our marriage. My attorney can discuss that with yours. You don't get to hide behind an attorney every time I ask a question. For 12 years. Asking questions had been responsibility when Claire did it, and conflict when I did. Now she wanted direct access again. Robert's tone hardened. Think about Noah. His school. His friends. Court filings can become public. Do you want your son growing up with everyone knowing his parents tore each other apart over money? My son is going to grow up knowing I made a decision I believed was necessary. This isn't just about you, Robert said. This money affects the entire family. There it was. Entitlement. No, I said. It affects the people who thought they were entitled to manage my life. Claire stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. You really think having money suddenly makes you competent? The old sentence. Wearing new clothes. For half a second, I felt the familiar instinct to explain myself. Then it passed. No, I said. Making my own decisions does. Claire stared at me. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. Robert rose. Be careful. Ethan, I have been careful for 12 years. The room went silent. Then I looked at Claire. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I've known for a long time. I just recently stopped pretending it was normal. Something in her face changed. Not regret. Recognition. She picked up her coat. Robert followed. At the door, he turned as if he wanted the last word, then decided against it. When they left, I locked the door and stood in the kitchen listening to my heartbeat. My hands were damp. The fear was still there. That mattered. Because courage was not the absence of that reaction. It was doing the right thing while my body still expected punishment. I called Evelyn and documented every detail. By the time I finished, my hands had stopped shaking. And the man Claire had spent 12 years teaching to doubt himself finally felt more real. The hearing was set for January 14th at the Hamilton County Domestic Relations Court. Cincinnati was gray that morning. I wore a navy suit Mike had helped me pick because he said my old one made me look like I was apologizing for being there. Evelyn sat beside me at the petitioner's table. Claire was across the aisle with her attorney. Daniel Graves, Robert, sat behind them in the gallery. Jason was there for me. Graves opened with the trust. He argued that the lottery ticket had been purchased during the marriage, that my consulting income was part of the marital economy, and that Sycamore Creek Family Trust was a deliberate attempt to hide an asset before filing for divorce. He made it sound clean, intentional, dishonest. Evelyn let him finish. Then she stood. Her first exhibit was the account I had opened before Claire and I married. The balance had stayed small for years. A little over $5,600. Funded through savings and occasional freelance deposits that had never passed through our joint accounts. The $2 used for the ticket had come from that account. The second exhibit was a financial tracing report. A forensic accountant had followed the path of the funds and confirmed there was no transfer from a joint account connected to the ticket purchase. Graves objected. The judge, Honorable Marissa Chen, overruled him. Then Evelyn moved to the third category: emails, spending rules, account restrictions. Messages from Claire telling me not to purchase equipment above specific amounts without approval. Records showing she controlled our investments. Passwords, household transfers, and long-term accounts. Evelyn did not call it abuse. She did not need to. She called it a documented pattern of unilateral financial control relevant to the court's assessment of credibility, access, and intent. Claire's expression changed. Then Evelyn introduced Exhibit G, the emails from Evan Brooks. Graves looked at Claire before he looked at the pages. That told me everything. He had not known. Claire had submitted a declaration claiming I had abruptly abandoned a stable marriage without meaningful warning, and that she had been unaware of any serious breakdown before the filing. Evelyn read one sentence from that declaration. Then she placed Evan's messages beside it. Judge Chen looked down at the exhibits. Ms. Mercer, she said, were you engaged in a romantic relationship with Mr. Brooks before your husband filed for divorce? Graves stood. Your Honor. Judge Chen raised one hand. I'm asking Ms. Mercer. Claire looked toward Graves, then at the table. There were complications in the marriage. That was not my question. Silence. Finally, Claire said, yes. Something in the room shifted. No one gasped. But the version of events Claire had been presenting was suddenly smaller than the evidence. Later, Graves called me to testify. He asked whether I had intentionally kept the trust secret from my wife. Yes, I said. He paused, perhaps surprised that I had not softened it. So, you admit concealing a financial activity from your spouse. I kept my private financial activity private. He leaned closer. While planning a divorce, while trying to understand what legal rights I had before making that decision. He looked toward Claire, then back at me. And you believe that was fair? I took a breath. Claire made the same choice with other parts of our marriage. The courtroom went quiet. Claire looked down. That was when I understood the balance had changed. For 12 years, she had been the person who explained what was reasonable, what was responsible, what counted as truth. Now she was sitting under oath while her own records explained her. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clear, and for the first time since I had known her. Claire looked genuinely uncertain. 3 weeks after the hearing, Evelyn called me at 9:07 on a Thursday morning. I was at Mike's house with coffee when she said, "We won." I sat down. Judge Chen's ruling confirmed that Sycamore Creek Family Trust was my separate property. The court accepted the tracing evidence, found no basis to pierce the trust, and rejected Claire's claim to the lottery proceeds. $38 million stayed exactly where Evelyn had put it. Mine to control. Custody was equally clear. I received primary physical custody of Noah, with Claire getting regular parenting time and holidays according to a schedule we negotiated. Claire kept her Lexus, retirement accounts, and other assets in her name. The Montgomery house would be sold, and we would split the equity. Nothing that belonged to Claire was taken from her. She simply did not receive what she had tried to claim from me. That mattered. This was never about destroying her. It was about refusing to surrender something because she believed she could manage it better. The divorce became final on March 3rd. I drove to the courthouse alone. Mike offered to come. Jason did too. I told them no. Some endings need witnesses. This one didn't. I signed the last papers, watched the clerk stamp them, and walked outside into cold sunlight. My old Subaru was already gone. 2 weeks earlier, I had bought a used dark blue Toyota Tacoma. Not because it was expensive, not because I needed to prove anything. I bought it because I liked it. That still felt revolutionary. I drove to the apartment I rented in Oakley while the house sale finished. Noah had covered one bedroom wall with space posters and robotics diagrams. I made coffee and sat by the window. No laptop waited for me. No one was going to ask what the truck cost. No one needed an explanation for the coffee maker I had chosen. For 12 years, uncertainty had frightened me because Claire always had a plan. Now I had no idea what the next year would look like. And for the first time in my adult life, not knowing felt less like danger than freedom. Claire did not accept the ruling quietly. Within 2 weeks, Graves filed a motion asking the court to reconsider the trust decision. Evelyn expected it. She answered point by point, and the motion was denied without changing a single part of the judgment. Claire tried another route once. During a school pickup, she made a sharp comment within earshot of 2 other parents, suggesting I had bought my freedom and damaged Noah's family for money. I did not argue. I called Evelyn. The next morning, Claire received a letter reminding her that public comments involving the divorce, financial proceedings, or our son could become relevant if the behavior continued. She stopped. Robert stopped contacting me too. I was grateful for the silence. A few months later, Jason heard through someone in Claire's professional circle that Evan Brooks had not lasted. Whatever existed between them ended 3 months after the divorce became final. When Jason told me, he watched my face like he expected something. Anger, satisfaction, maybe relief. I felt almost nothing. That surprised me more than the news itself. For years, Claire's choices had determined the temperature of my entire day. Now the end of her affair felt like information about someone I used to know. Evelyn's final invoice came to $46,000. I paid it the day it arrived. Then, I closed the email, opened a notebook, and wrote one sentence across the first page. What do I want my life to look like now that summer? After the house in Montgomery sold, I bought a place in Oakley. Not a mansion, not something designed to prove I had won. It was a 1920s Craftsman with a deep porch, an oversized garage, hardwood floors, and a backyard shaded by 2 maple trees. The garden had been neglected. The kitchen needed work, and one upstairs window stuck whenever the weather turned humid. I loved it immediately. Noah did too. There was a battered basketball hoop over the garage and enough space in the backyard for engineering projects. I made an offer that afternoon. Mike and Jason helped us move in on Saturday. We carried boxes, argued about where the workbench should go, and ate pizza on the living room floor. Noah fell asleep that night in a sleeping bag surrounded by half-open boxes and robotics parts. It was not perfect. That was the point. The first year after the divorce was still hard. Noah missed Claire. Some weekends he came home quiet. I never made him choose. Claire was his mother, not my enemy to hand him. The house did not erase what happened. It gave us somewhere of our own to begin again. After the divorce, I rebuilt Mercer Cost and Project Consulting. What had once been a handful of clients became work across 3 counties. I hired a junior estimator, upgraded the software, and stopped treating the business like something temporary. Then I enrolled in a personal finance course at the community college. I did not need another advisor. Evelyn had connected me with excellent people. I wanted to understand the language Claire had used for 12 years to make me feel dependent. Investing, risk, retirement, taxes. The more I learned, the less mysterious any of it became. I also started running before sunrise. 3 miles at first, slow, awkward, mine. No one chose the route. No one judged the pace. Noah eventually convinced me to visit the county shelter. We came home with a mutt with oversized ears. He named him Scout. That drawing on the refrigerator had become real. So had something else. I was building a life at a pace I chose, A few years later, I still heard pieces of Claire's life from friends. She never fell apart. She kept working. She moved downtown. She dated. Though nothing lasted, Robert still had dinner with her Sundays. What disappeared was not Claire's life. It was the system she had built around mine. No house where every purchase could be reviewed. No husband sitting across from her while she decided what was responsible. No Sunday night laptop. No assumption that her judgment mattered more because she understood numbers. I never believed the universe gave me $68 million because I deserved rescuing. I bought a ticket because I wanted one decision that belonged only to me. Then the numbers came up. The important part was what happened next. I could have called Claire immediately. I could have handed her the ticket, let her hire lawyers, choose advisors, and turn a fortune into a larger version of the same life. I didn't. I sat alone at 2 in the morning and decided to understand my choices before anyone made them for me. Noah is 13. He still loves robotics, though last month he said he might become an engineer or lawyer. I told him both sounded good. Our life is not perfect. Sometimes I still hear Claire's voice when I spend money I do not need to justify. But it gets quieter. The money was never the revenge. The revenge was learning that keeping the peace had cost me myself and deciding I would never pay that price again. If life handed you one chance to choose yourself, would you recognize it before someone else chose for you?